Welcome back to my channel. I'm Trayman, and today we're looking at everything I read in the month of January, but I'm only giving myself 1 minute to talk about each book. So before we start, I want to say that this idea was born partially out of inspiration from Katie Coulson's Worst Of video for 2023, in which she only allowed herself 1 minute to talk about each of the books. And partially out of desperation because it is the last week of February and I don't have a lot of time to finish up this video, so we got to get through it quick. A good number of books that I read in January we're going to cover very quickly because they are part of my ongoing manga tournament, and I already have dedicated videos talking in quite a bit of detail about why they received the rank that they did. So to get through those very quickly, for 2-star reads in that manga tournament, we have Goblin Slayer, we have Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon, and we have Demon Slayer. For 3-star reads, B-Stars and Ghostly Things. For 4-star reads, we have Wotakoi, Hell's Paradise, Black Clover, Fire Force, and kind of surprisingly, Blood on the Tracks. I really enjoyed this one, but it only ended up at 4 stars. And then for 5-star reads, we have Witch Hat Atelier and The Promised Neverland. So, again, there are dedicated videos to all of those in the manga tournament, so we're not going to spend any more time on those here. I've got a 1 minute timer, and we will start going through, starting at the 3-star reads. The first one is If I Have to Be Haunted. So this one was actually kind of surprising in that I thought, based on the description, that it was going to be a lot more romance heavy. This one is one of the Fairy Loot books. I was trying to get through a number of those this month, and partway into the book, it becomes a very different story than I thought it was going to be, where it suddenly becomes this like crazy liminal space fantasy story. There were some cool concepts in here, but it's still very much like a typical YA fish out of water adventure story. I did not like the romance at all. It wasn't really enemies to lovers. It was more like some kind of annoyances to lovers thing, or to boyfriend girlfriend thing, and it didn't really work for me. So that combined with just the kind of outlandish turn that it takes at one point was really rather distracting, and so nope. Save Yourself. This is a graphic novel about a girl who is learning that the superheroes that she worships, that came down and saved humanity from this alien space, from these aliens, is actually a group of aliens themselves, and they stage all these things. They're really evil, and they're really here to like take over the planet. I felt like a lot of the things in here didn't quite work. It has like a sapphic romance as one of the key plot points, or one of the key elements of it, and I think that's why it was getting so much press. But I felt like the alien story and the plot itself was not really fully fleshed out. The final fight feels very undeserved, like it doesn't feel very exciting. And so now we're in the 4-star reads. So The Forest Grimm is another one of the Fairy Loot books that I got through this month. I like this one quite a bit more than If I Have to Be Haunted, but it did hit those same vibes of not really enemies to lovers, it's friends to lovers. There was a bit of annoyance for me in that early on in the book, the main character is very adamant that like just because I'm trying to do something nice for my friend doesn't mean that there's romantic interest involved, and then it very gradually or very quickly becomes obvious that the two of them are in love with each other. I found the forest idea, this like living forest idea, is actually one of my favorite subgenres, and so that part I really enjoyed. And also, it's like an alternative telling of several of the classic fairy tale stories in a very interesting way, and so that's why I get 4 stars. Another 4-star read was The Bonesmith. So this one really gave me vibes of Gideon the Ninth. I feel like if you found Gideon the Ninth to be a little bit too like esoteric and weird, or you started up the sequel book and it was off-putting, which was the case with me. I started the audiobook for that second one, and the second person narration, weird things were happening. I feel like this is a very similar vibe in that most of the characters you're following, or the primary character you're following, deals with death magic and necromancy and things like that. But the story itself is a much more straightforward YA kind of adventure story. She has to go into these forbidden lands with someone that she doesn't fully trust, and try to figure out the secrets of the way the world actually works around her. The magic was very cool. The setting was very interesting. Giga was a book that I feel like I'm probably going to need to read another time. I felt like the end in particular was a little bit too esoteric for me. So this deals with a society in which these giant robots kind of loom over the cities and are seen as protectors, but the main character's not sure. They feel like maybe there's more of a malicious intent behind them. And then I feel like it goes into this political intrigue and this like religious angle, all very interesting, but it wrapped up very quick. And the revelations that happened at the end of the book were so fast and so confusing that I'm not quite sure what the takeaway was supposed to be. And so again, I feel like maybe I'm not smart enough for this book, or maybe I just need to read it again with the understanding of where the story is ultimately going to go. Zita the Space Girl is something I was reading to my daughter at bedtime over the course of the month. It is a cute story about a girl who gets teleported through a wormhole into this alien world. She joins forces with a number of very odd robots and a character named Piper who can control things with his flute. And she goes on this adventure to try to save her friend who also fell through the wormhole with her. It's fun. It's cute. And I've read it before, but I felt like we're reading through the series now, and I did want to talk about it this time, so I counted it as my reads. So I would say if you're a fan of like kids comics, that this is definitely one of the stronger ones. Ben Hatke has written a number of really solid. All right, I read the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin, and this one was one that was recommended to me by a coworker who heard that I liked Brandon Sanderson books. Well, he recommended the author. He hadn't read this particular series yet, but this is the one that we already owned. And so this is the one I picked up. I felt like there were a number of very odd choices in this, including the use of second person, which I've only seen in a handful of books. I feel like there was a purpose to it, and the revelation later in the book does go some way into explaining why you'd want to use second person for part of the book, but ultimately I felt like it wasn't as strong as some of the other more modern fantasy that I've been reading, and I felt like the magic system was not very well explained. It kind of just threw you in. 2 other books that I've read as audiobooks that got 4 stars. The first is Nettle and Bone. Nettle and Bone I found a very interesting fantasy story of revenge. I liked the way that magic worked in this one. It's all very much a dark fantasy setting, and a lot of kind of twisting of fairy tale tropes. So there are godmothers in this world that can grant boons to a house, and you find that like some of them are not very strong, some are stronger than others, and some can only grant curses. And so it kind of plays off of that idea of like the fairy godmother or the Maleficent kind of character. And so that was all very interesting. The last 4-star read was The Future of Humanity by Michio Kaku. I've read some of Michio Kaku's other books before. I found this one to be not the strongest that I've read from him. It was a very fascinating look at the history of space travel, the concept of terraforming, the potential future technologies for traveling into space or colonizing other planets, other potential areas where we could mine resources and things like that. A lot of that information I feel like I'd gleaned from other like science shows and things like that. I was listening to this as an audiobook, and so while it was very fascinating, it wasn't as new to me as some of his other concepts have been, his other futurist books have been. Into 5-star reads, so I rated A Raisin in the Sun, which I read for my English class. My students were reading this as a 5-star. It is a classic play by Lorraine Hansberry about an African-American family in like the 1960s who get their father's life insurance money and are trying to figure out what to do with it. All of them have their own individual schemes. It's a lot of, or their own individual plans. I don't want to call them all schemes, although one of the characters is definitely something I would refer to as a scheme. But they all have their own individual plans of what they'd like to do with the money. And it's a lot of the family drama of what do you do with this money? What does it say when the only way you can achieve your dreams is if someone has to die? So a lot of heavy topics in here, and I thought it was very poignant. All right, and the last one for a 5-star read is Heartstopper's Volume 5. I mentioned this in passing in my review of Wotakoi, but one of the things I really enjoy about this series is how every volume continues with some new source of drama between the two main characters and their continuing relationship, and how both characters have something that they want or something that they're not getting out of the relationship or something they're worried about for the relationship, and how it deftly works between discussing these things and not always giving the characters exactly what they want. Sometimes compromises have to be made, and I feel like that's a very realistic look at relationships, and it's not just like everything ends up happy for these characters just because they got together. All right, so that's everything I read in January. Let me know if confining myself to 1 minute was a great idea or a terrible one. As always, I hope your reading journey is going well. Please like, comment, subscribe, tell me down below, what have you been reading lately? What did you read in January? What are you reading now? Have you taken a look at any of these titles, and what were your thoughts? I'd love to hear it. So until the next one, take care.